Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be building a gaming PC using these parts you see here. They'll be listed in the description below, but as I build the PC, I'll go over each part and why I picked it. Well, thanks for coming to the channel and let's get started. First, we're going to take apart the case and we're going to install the fans and the power supply. We're starting out here because once the motherboard's done, we want to put it directly into the case. We don't want it sitting in a vulnerable position. Also, we're putting the fans on the outside of the case, so we're going to be screwing from the inside, and we don't want to hit the motherboard. These are pop-out ones, and the only one they give you extra is black. Some zip ties and some screws. So if you pop the wrong ones out, you'll have to replace it with a black one. So be careful on that. I'm doing it this way, so hopefully you can see it. I'll do it at a couple different angles. We'll start with the bottom one. The reason we start with the bottom one is because then you can set the next one on top of it pretty easily, and it just makes life easier. One thing I like to do is think about where the wires are going to be coming from once it's in there. Another thing is these are directional. The air goes towards the cage side. If you don't know what the cage side is, it's the side that's holding the fan on. The other side is the open side. The air comes in this way and goes out this way. So we want them this way because this is going to be intake. Now you could put them here, or you could put them on the inside like this. If you put them on the inside, you're going to see the cage through the front. You're not going to get as good a lighting effect, but you might get slightly better airflow. We are going to put them on the outside so we get maximum lighting effect. Also, it's not really going to restrict the airflow that much. 3 of these plus an exhaust is going to be more than enough to move the air in here. Plus with the parts in here, none of them are very high power, or they don't put out, none of them are high power, so therefore they don't put out much heat. So like I said, just think about where your cables are going to be coming out and try and make them all go the same way because they'll just look better once they're together. The fans we're using are Thermalright TLC12CS 120mm ARGB fans. They are 4-pin PWM and 3-pin ARGB. They have daisy chain connectors on both. The case we're working in is a Vetroo M03. It's a MATX case. It's in green. It's perforated everywhere, so it's going to have really good airflow. I like the glass door. It's hinged. I just really like the looks of it, and I want to see how it performs. Install the power supply with the fan pointing down so it draws in cold air from the bottom and blows it out the back. The power supply we're going with in this rig is a Corsair VS600 80+ white power supply. It comes with a 3-year warranty and it's 600 watts. It has nice sleeved cables. I've used a few of these in the past. I've always had luck with them, no problems. I really like Corsair as a company. The processor we're going with today is an Intel 13th Gen i3 13100F. It's a 4-core, 8-thread processor. Its predecessor, the 12100F, was perfect for gaming. This is the exact same processor, just boosts a little bit higher, and it's going to be a rock-solid processor for gaming. You just line up the notches on the processor with the notches on the socket and set it down in there. And then you bring down the latch, make sure you catch that bar, and just latch it into place. That cover will pop off when you do this. The hard drive we're going to be installing today is a TeamGroup 1TB MP33 NVMe SSD. It's M.2 2280 form. It's a PCIe 3.0. It's got a 5-year warranty. When you're placing it in there, just make sure you're on a 30-degree angle and you just press it in there and then press it down. The 3.0 really doesn't need a heat spreader, but if you put a heat spreader on it, make sure you pull that film cover off the back, and I like to run the screws down evenly. The motherboard we're using today is an AsRock B660 Pro RS. It supports both Intel 12th and 13th gen, which I really wanted because I'm going with 13th gen. I didn't want any weird problems. It's got some big heat sinks on it, so it'll be good for upgrading the PC or the CPU in the future. It's got enough ARGB headers. It's got 5 4-pin PWM headers, which I like. That's more than enough for an MATX case. We're just going with the stock cooler on this CPU just because it's more than enough. When you're installing it, it's just a push pin, so just make sure you push the pins all the way through. Like I said earlier, I like to work on a surface that has some give so I don't break anything. Now I'm getting the case ready for the motherboard to go in. I'm making sure the standoffs are in the correct position, which they're not, so I'm putting them in the correct position. And this is the time to put your back plate in if you haven't already. I like to wipe out the case before I put the motherboard in to make sure there's no loose metal shavings. Also, I'm getting the wires out of my way. After you set the motherboard down in there, make sure that everything lines up on the rear I/O and that you can plug everything in. Then I like to start all the screws and then walk them down one at a time. Now we're going to start running fan wires. I'm daisy chaining the front 3 fans together, both the ARGB and the PWM. When you're doing the PWM, you just clip them together and they will stay together because of the clip. But when you do the ARGB ones, I usually electric tape them, otherwise they like to pull apart. If I can, I prefer to plug the cables into the bottom of the motherboard because the GPU will hide them. Try not to cross wires in the back before you plug them in. That way, it'll make it easier when you're sorting them out later. I like to hide the wires, but you can run them however you want. The HD audio is also directional. You'll see that there's 1 pin missing, and that'll correspond on the plug, and the same with the USB. When plugging in the power button, reset switch, and LEDs, just use the motherboard's manual. Plugging in the front USB Type 3 cable now. It's directional. I like to peel the wires apart so that makes it easier to plug them in. This doesn't hurt anything, it doesn't expose anything. They're all individually sealed. On the back of the plugs, you'll see an arrow that indicates the positive side. And for RAM, we're going with 2 8GB sticks of TeamGroup Vulcan Z DDR4 at 3600 megahertz. It's perfect for gaming. You really don't need anything more than that. Just make sure you put it in the right slots and the right orientation as well. It's directional. Usually it's A2 and B2 are the priority slots. That is what it is on this board. That's what it is on most 4DIMM boards. On the back, at first I like to just use twist ties to get things in position. Then once I know where everything's going for sure, then I'll use zip ties. Just try and follow the natural layout of the case. Use the edge of the case when you can. Tuck the wires behind the case where you can. Don't just shove them through any hole. Put them where they're closest to being plugged in. All the SATA ports that I'm not using, I'm just going to twist tie together and then shove back underneath. When plugging in the ATX and the EPS cables, they are directional and they are kind of hard to push in sometimes. Just make sure you hear the click. The graphics card we're going with is an AMD AsRock RX 6650 XT. It's a great little efficient graphics card for gaming. You can stream on it as well. It's just like the 6600 but better. It's going to have higher clocks on both the GPU and the memory. They just bin them higher. It's got an 8GB VRAM, GDDR6. It's PCI 4.0, RDNA 2. Just make sure you press the PCIe button down before you put the graphics card in there. And when I'm tightening down the graphics card, I like to lift it up towards the top of the cage before I actually screw it down all the way. I get them both started, and then I press up and then I tighten them down. That way it reduces the sag. This graphics card's super light anyways, so it probably won't sag. It also runs really cool. You really don't hear this graphics card at all unless you set the profile yourself and you set it really high, like over 80%. Otherwise you don't even hear this graphics card. It's really quiet. I did benchmark it, and you can check out the benchmarks at the end of the video. It uses an 8-pin power connector. You just slide them together if you got a 6 and a 2 like I have. It's really nice having just an 8-pin and being able to play any game you want. It has another wire piggyback to it, so I'm going to zip tie them together underneath the GPU so you can't see it really. Now I'm just zip tying wires and making everything look real nice. Like I was saying earlier, just try and follow the natural layout of the case and also where the wires are just going. Don't force anything. Use your biggest braided cables last, or your sleeved cables, so that you cover everything up. And obviously you care about the front more than the back. When you open up the back of the PC, you don't want it looking like a nest of snakes springing out to strike you. Now to the benchmarks. First up, Cinebench, and we got a score of 3,337. Next up, we got Time Spy, and we got a score of 9,460 there. Then we got Firestrike with a legendary score of 23,751, which was enough to take first place. Next up, we got the Unigine benchmarks, and I ran them both. With the DX9, we got the score of 8,235. And with the DX11, we got a score of 5,233. During benchmarking, nothing really got out of the 60s. When I do the case review, I'll give you more accurate thermals. Until then, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'm going to leave you with some B-roll. Take care, everyone.